You've seen the photos. An elephant standing motionless over a pile of bones. A dog lying by a grave for days, refusing to leave. It's easy to scroll past and feel something, and just as easy to wonder if you're imagining meaning that isn't actually there. So here's what's coming. A primate species that carries her dead infant for weeks, refusing to put the body down. Crows that gather around their dead in something disturbingly close to a funeral. A whale who pushed her dead calf through open ocean for 17 days straight. And underneath all of it, the uncomfortable question science avoided for decades. Are these animals actually grieving, or are we just projecting our own emotions onto instinct we don't understand? Let's find out. Death is constant in the animal kingdom, and most of the time it's treated with total indifference. A carcass is food, or it's a threat, or it's simply irrelevant. The herd moves on within minutes. But sometimes, animals don't move on. And for a long time, scientists were genuinely afraid to explain why. The word grief was close to taboo in ethology for decades. Too human, too easy to project onto a species that can't correct you if you're wrong. Here's the evolutionary why underneath this entire video. Grief, in humans, is expensive. It disrupts eating, sleeping, basic functioning, sometimes for weeks. Evolution is not in the business of keeping costly traits around for no reason. So if grief serves some purpose in us, the obvious question follows, does anything like it exist elsewhere? For most of the 20th century, the safe scientific answer was no. Just instinct, just confusion at a missing herd member. Nothing deeper going on. But the field evidence kept accumulating. Case after case, species after species, and eventually it got very hard to keep calling all of it a coincidence. So what changed the conversation? Start with the animal everyone already half suspects. Researcher Cynthia Moss, who has run the Amboseli Elephant Research Project in Kenya for decades, has documented elephants behaving strangely around their dead. And not just their own family's dead. Any elephant remains. They approach slowly. They go quiet. They touch the bones and skulls gently with their trunks, sometimes for extended stretches of time, in a way that looks nothing like scavenging or threat checking. Matriarchs have been observed returning to the same remains years later. Not for food. Elephant bones offer nothing nutritionally. Not for new information, since there's nothing left to learn. They just return. This is the gritty detail nobody wants to sit with. An enormous, intelligent animal standing over bones, doing something that provides no obvious survival benefit at all. And here's the thing. This isn't unique to elephants, not even close. So if it's not just elephants, how far down does this actually go? Crows. Yes, crows. Researcher Kaylee Swift at the University of Washington has run controlled experiments on what's now informally called crow funerals. Place a dead crow on the ground, and within minutes, other crows begin to gather, loudly, calling, circling overhead. Sometimes dozens show up for a single bird they may not have even known personally. Here's the evolutionary why. Swift's research suggests this is primarily information gathering. The crows are learning what killed their flockmate so they can avoid the same fate. Threat assessment, not sentiment. That's the Tier 1 explanation. Established, measured, and replicated across multiple studies. But here's where the multi-causal question opens up. Is it only threat assessment? Crows are famously intelligent, deeply social, and capable of remembering individual human faces for years. They hold grudges with genuine precision. Reindeer doing drug recycling in Siberia? Respect. But crows running what amounts to a full investigative debrief over their own dead? That's a different tier of behavior entirely. So, information, emotion, or both at once? The line scientists once drew here isn't nearly as clean as it used to be. 2018. An orca known as Tahlequah, designation J35, gave birth to a calf that died within half an hour. What happened next made international news for weeks. Tahlequah pushed the dead calf's body through the water, balancing it on her head, diving to retrieve it every single time it slipped free. She did this for 17 days across more than 1,000 miles of open ocean. Here's the gritty detail underneath the headline. Carrying a dead calf costs real, measurable energy. Orcas need to hunt constantly to sustain their body mass. Tahlequah wasn't hunting properly for over 2 weeks. She was slowly starving herself to keep carrying a body that was never coming back to life. Other orcas in her pod took turns supporting the calf when she visibly tired. This wasn't confusion. This was sustained, costly, deliberate behavior. And it's about to blow open a question that's been building since Chapter 1. For a long time, the standard scientific response to stories like Tahlequah's was simple. You're anthropomorphizing, projecting human emotion onto animal behavior, scientifically illegitimate. Case closed. Recent evidence has seriously complicated that dismissal. Researchers have measured elevated cortisol, the same physiological stress hormone humans produce under grief and trauma, in primates and other mammals following the death of a close companion. This isn't a fringe theory. Comparative neuroscience has identified brain structures involved in attachment and loss that are structurally shared across many mammal species. Not identical to human grief circuitry, but not unrelated either. This is Tier 2 territory. Reasonable, evidence-backed inference, not settled certainty. So the old dismissal doesn't hold up as cleanly as it once did. The measurable biology is genuinely there. What we still can't measure is the subjective experience sitting behind it, and that gap matters enormously. But here's what actually shifted the conversation. You cannot run a stress hormone test on projection. Something real is happening inside these animals' bodies, whether or not science is ready to call it grief with full confidence. So if something real is happening, why would evolution build it in the first place? Here's the multi-causal reveal, and it's a significant one. Reason 1. Social bond maintenance. Species that live in tight cooperative groups need strong attachment systems just to function day to day. Reason 2. Information and learning. Exactly like the crows, understanding a death can mean avoiding the same threat. Reason 3, and this one's uncomfortable. Grief may simply be a costly byproduct of intelligence and attachment systems that originally evolved for something else entirely, keeping parents bonded to offspring long enough for those offspring to survive. Primatologist Barbara King, who has written extensively on animal grief, argues that grief-like responses appear wherever strong attachment bonds exist across species, not as one single evolved trait, but as the overlap of several independent pressures stacking on top of each other. Social cohesion, threat learning, attachment machinery that doesn't simply switch off the moment a bond ends. 3 separate causes pointing toward the exact same outward behavior. That's not coincidence. That's convergent evolutionary pressure. Here's the obvious counterargument, and it deserves a real answer. Grief requires understanding that death is permanent, and animals, the skeptic argues, simply don't have that concept. So whatever we're watching isn't grief, it's confusion, dressed up in a sad story. Let's be precise about what's established and what genuinely isn't. Established. Many species show clear, measurable behavioral disruption following a death. Reduced eating, disrupted sleep, elevated physiological stress. That's not in dispute. What's genuinely speculative is whether any of these animals possess a conceptual understanding of mortality the way humans do. The honest answer is, we don't know, and we may never fully know. You cannot ask an elephant what she believes about death. Absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence, but we can't confirm the inner experience either. That gap is real, and pretending otherwise, in either direction, isn't good science. What we can say is this: you don't need a philosophy of mortality to be disrupted, physically and behaviorally, by permanent loss. Human grief isn't purely intellectual either. Maybe that's the more honest comparison to make.